I write a column about radio. I think about the future of radio a lot. For the last 6 months, I've been thinking of it in terms of this word, audio. It all started at, of course, the radio show 6 months ago in Orlando. I thought it was the best radio show in a long time. Thank you, Erica. It was clear-eyed, like this room, about what we had to do. It had, I thought, a number of watershed moments. And I thought one of the watershed moments was on the group heads panel Thursday morning. Lou Dickey broke from radio's talking points up until that moment. Even though Clear Channel had iHeartRadio, streaming audio was not radio. It was not taking from radio. It was a completely different business. And there was Lou having struck this deal with RDO going, it's all audio. That was major, I thought. I came back to New York. I got ready to moderate a panel for Syracuse University for their Newhouse School. There were great people on this panel: Buzz Knight, Dan Mason, Dion Livingston of WBLS, Ed Levine, Patrick Walsh of Emmis. It was part of what they were calling the Audio Summit. And that morning, a well-known sales guy in the syndication business came up to me, and I said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "It's a great week to be in the audio business." And I said, out of curiosity, "How long have you been calling it the audio business?" And he said, "Since this morning." That was the week radio, at least for some people, became audio, which raises a lot of questions to me. I began to wonder, how can we be radio in an audio world? Why is that even worth thinking about? It's not just semantics. It raises a lot of questions. For starters, anybody can be audio. Disney makes audio. Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine make audio. Apple makes audio. Google makes audio. We used to wonder when these people were going to start buying radio stations. Only Disney did, and now they're selling theirs. The rest just waited until they didn't need radio stations. Next question. What elements of radio culture must survive? I am a product of radio culture. Radio culture is important to me. It's not just nostalgia. As Bud was saying last night at dinner, anything else we might do, radio culture is the foundation. So what do we do right? What's worth keeping? Setting our sights beyond the stick. Once we have taken that foundation, what could we be doing that we're not doing now? And finally, once we have identified our strengths, how do we leverage them? We can run in a lot of different directions. Many of us already are running in a lot of different directions. There is a lack of unity that's hurting broadcasters here, and I think it's noticeable through this transition. And one other question. If we were radio in September and audio in October, who are we? Radio used to be essentially a gated community. There was, as it's been noted, a high cost of entry, and we had the FCC to basically organize the whole dial for us. Now, we're heading for something else, and not just in the car. The buttons are going to be our radio stations, they're going to be Pandora, they're going to be Call Home, and as someone noted earlier today, Order Pizza. Radio is no longer a gated community, except for this one where we all are today. And it's awesome. In rooms like this, we are used to being a small, defined community. Because we have been a fixed group, broadcasters have been an ad hoc family. Sometimes we have been this ad hoc family. And I would like to, at this point, emphasize that I'm not saying we literally smuggle contraband, but except for those of you who are radio in the 70s, I can't speak for that. But we are coming up on a border crossing. We do have to manage to be a family, particularly now, which is sometimes difficult. Broadcasters over the last 4 decades have been doing things that are not particularly fraternal. They negative sell against each other. They undercut each other. They put on radio stations that aren't even meant to win, just mess the other guy up. At this moment, we can't even all decide if we're in the same business right now. When everybody else was in Orlando, Clear Channel was in Vegas. They were getting ready for the iHeartRadio Festival. One of the things that a lot of the group had said to me over the next week was, they're not in the radio business anymore. They are in the iHeart business and they are in the concert business. And everybody now has a slightly different combination of things. CBS is very cheerfully in the radio plus TV business. Emmis is is by necessity in the radio versus smartphone business. We can't always decide how we want to self-identify. Cumulus has never been Cumulus Radio, they've been Cumulus Media. In fact, of the people you saw on the screen this morning, only Radio 1 still self-identifies as radio, and CBS. Clear Channel, as previously noted, 18 months ago they became Clear Channel Music and Entertainment. They were iHeartRadio, now they are I'm Not Radio. At the same time, Pandora wants to be called radio, iTunes wants to be called radio, and we resent them for that. Rdio, we have the irony of Cumulus, operates radio stations and is not radio, operating something called Rdio that is not radio. And yet, what this all shows us is that radio is something easily understood, radio is something positive, radio is something that people still want to be a part of. So what makes radio radio? You will have your own checklist. Mine begins with the shared experience. Bob Costas has a line. American Pie came out on Monday, and by Friday, everybody knew it. Here is another shared experience story from Tom's old station, Kixie and Jackson. They have a midday host who every day takes people through stretching and breathing exercises at their desks. And it's sold to Home Depot. So clearly it's a feature of some value.
When did they start doing that?
I just came across it.
The day the sales guy came in with the order.
Right.
I got this great idea.
Right. Who knows what it was presented as in the sales and promotion meeting, but showmanship. Now that's putting on a concert. It used to be everything that happened over every record. It used to be every piece of production. It used to be being bigger than life. We got some of that scared out of us during PPM. We have taught our staffs to start engaging with people on social media, and we have scared them out of doing it on the air. Engaging with the listeners has essentially become something that we have put on the van, like a promotion we don't want. And I think that's great that the opportunity exists to interact with the listeners on social media. I think, as was pointed out last night, that the first reason you would want to interact with a radio station on social media is because of something that happened on the radio. Music discovery. Anybody, name any hit song after 1967.
Light My Fire, The Doors.
All right, I was in Chicago.
So is no.
I was watching I was watching a TV show on Channel 26 called Kitty A Go-Go, which was like American Bandstand, which, by the way, is okay because I was 5 at the moment. Non-broadcasters don't do that, but I do have a memory for how radio figured in introducing me to most songs. And music recovery, taking people back to those memories. That was the genius of Bob and Jack. If you have a chance to listen on the way back to the airport, check out 98.3 Hank FM, which is doing the same thing with classic country and is really good. Sense of place. We have made live and local our mantra. But sense of place is even more than that. The ultimate compliment for a radio station, I think, used to be the consultant came to town or the group head came to town and said, I don't understand them. They're terrible. Why do they have a 12 share? That was usually an indicator that this station was doing such a great job of serving its market that you kind of had to be from there to understand it. But I also appreciate sense of place when I come across it in another radio station out of my market. There's a classic country station in Houma, Louisiana I was listening to, and every ad had something to do with the offshore drilling industry. WJLK in Monmouth County. After Hurricane Sandy, I'm sorry that this had to happen, but it was the best, most compelling radio I've heard in years, because after other radio stations had moved on, clearly people in Monmouth County and the Jersey Shore had not been able to move on with their lives, and pretty much every break, every ad, was about Sandy recovery. That is when you get a sense of place. Companionship. We think of it as high-profile personality, but it's really any companionship on the radio. If you think of Valerie Smaldone on Light FM in New York, she was always just friendly and low-key. She didn't do much because nobody on the station did a lot. And yet, when she left, I am sure people missed her just as much as they missed any high-profile morning show. So, this is our awesome punch list. I'm sure I'm leaving some out. Anybody? This is, it's a good place to start. I probably could have added public service. I probably could have added live and local separately. How about ubiquitous? Ubiquitous is good. That's part of what I meant by shared experience. But if you look at the pure plays, about which we've heard so much today, most of them are not even trying to be in this business. Most of them have looked at this checklist and they've basically passed. Apple, they certainly have the capability of creating their own Sirius XM all over again. They could have staffed up 15 radio stations, 50 radio stations, 100 radio stations with the 7 best jocks on each channel. They didn't do that. They certainly could have. Beats Music just got $60 million in funding. They have Dre and Jimmy Iovine and Trent Reznor behind them. They decided not to be in the entertainment business. They are sort of in the music discovery business. Pandora, these days they play pretty much the same hits as everybody else, but they started out in the music discovery business. Also, with the stats that you've seen from the Infinite Dial, that 31% of America listened to them last month, they are a shared experience of some sort. But for the most part, they leave us this checklist to ourselves. And then you have to ask yourself, does radio do all these things on our awesome checklist? Someone brought this article up at lunch. It came out in January. It came out in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know how many of you still follow music closely, but the upshot of this article was that radio station playlists have tightened dramatically, even as there are more places to discover music. Some people can spin this article as a positive. We played the hits. I thought it was devastating. It said to me that we were losing a lot of the excitement about what radio does.
John, the last line of the article is, taking risks is not rewarded, so we have to be more careful than ever before.
And how many risks are people taking? These are stats from BDS Nielsen. These are the number of songs that went top 20 at each format last year. At top 40, it was about 2 a week. At Urban AC, it was about 1.5. You can see the country, which used to be a notoriously slow chart, is playing somewhat more current music and thriving, and they're actually third now. AAA and alternative, which we used to think of as the starter formats, are actually slower than top 40 at this moment. There are fewer hits now. I think there are a couple of reasons for it. One is that everything has gotten so close to top 40 that instead of developing hits for top 40, other formats are just basically taking their cues from top 40. And the other is that we have created a culture in our stations, or it has somehow come to pass, that somebody who wants to pay too much attention to the music, someone who wants to pay too much attention to a significant part of your station's product, is no longer valued. They have other things to do. We don't value that person at the moment.
I think there's several other issues here in play. When we talked about last night, there's fewer and fewer record labels, all of which
Right.
are controlled by just several companies, 2 or 3 companies. But just as importantly, if you take a look at what's happened in a lot of the smaller markets, and I remember watching a movie on TV a couple of months ago about Patsy Cline, and how she and her promoter went around to each little radio station handing out copies of discs and trying to get some airplay while she was sitting there. Would that ever happen today? The answer is no. Because most of this is chosen by people that aren't even remotely close or tied to the markets that they're programming.
Well, and songs don't start in Bakersfield and work up to Fresno and work up to San Francisco.
That's the
The
point.
stations that have the nerve to break records are Z100. The big city stations, those PDs still have a little bit of autonomy, and people watch them and they hand records down, but you're absolutely right. There are fewer heroic PDs, and there are fewer PDs who are empowered to find records.
In the country music area, all of that still exists. I can't speak to the other stuff, but in the country music,
I agree with that.
Taylor Swift
Yeah.
and our station.
That's
they're
right.
going out to, even, people are going out to stations, they're doing it, but it's a particular genre, but it is.
And the artists show up. If
The
you
artists-
need an artist, they'll either be on the phone or they'll show up at your doorstep. Try to do that with a lot of top 40 artists.
Yeah, it's gotten better, and I think the numbers reflect it. Country has actually gotten more liberal as far as playing new music. They used to move in lockstep and all watch one chart. Now you have a handful of PDs, particularly at the CBS stations, who are going out and looking for the next song on the album.
When was the last time you heard an air personality talk about the music they play on the radio? I mean, we never talk about our primary product.
Yeah, especially morning shows. Morning shows are produced and structured we now play music in mornings again because of PPM,
Yeah.
but we produce them to pretend that the music is essentially another commercial. It is an interruption to them doing their shtick. What if the funniest and most engaging people on our radio stations were actually trying to entertain and sell the music? But they don't right now.
That's part of emotions.
How are we doing on live and local? It's been our mantra for 6 months. The good news, yeah, this is from a radio station that has one local air shift. But when they're local, this is the mic flag. We're seeing some progress.
The computer playing the music is local.
Yeah, I mean, we are already playing games with it, and I'll come back to that in a second. The good news is, in the research I do, live and local is starting to cut through and starting to be something that people value. Even some of the syndicators are seeing this. In Los Angeles, Clear Channel moves Rush Limbaugh to another station, and KFI becomes live and local. In St. Louis, the big urban AC takes their old morning show back and replaces Steve Harvey. In Detroit, Tom Joyner moves to another station, and John Mason, the longtime morning man, comes back. But it goes both ways, because in Detroit, Clear Channel just moved The Breakfast Club, their syndicated morning show, onto WJLB. It used to be that we tried to white label when a radio station was not using local radio. Now we don't even try to pretend anymore. Most of the Clear Channel Premium Choice stations just don't even say the call letters. They do not even insert the call letters. I heard something interesting driving in last night. Everybody has listened to iHeartRadio online. Everybody has heard those artist promos they insert instead of commercials now, the artist bios and top 10 countdowns and so forth. Has everybody had the experience of them sometimes running when music is supposed to be playing and music being rejoined in the middle? I've had that happen on iHeartRadio. Last night, I was driving in from the airport. I was listening to Love 101 in Savannah, which is their big urban AC, and I come across one of those iHeartRadio artist promos, and I thought, this is interesting. They're running this on the over-the-air signal now. It ends, and they rejoined a song in progress.
Yeah.
They couldn't control it on the streams, and now they can control it on the air. That's what the streaming experience has become. As I said, we used to be producing white label content. Now we have Nash FMs where that's become, if anything, the novelty. And I think there is good national radio. I grew up on WLS, I grew up on CKLW. Part of the appeal was the shared experience and the fact that they were beaming all over America. I think K-Love, the Christian network, is probably the closest thing we have to WLS now in terms of being great radio that just happens to be experienced across the country at the same time. I think anybody who listens to Sirius XM 20 on 20 with their kids has had a shared experience. Everybody can pretty much do the same imitation of Spider Harrison. And The Breakfast Club, the show that they put on in Detroit, is pretty good. But as my boss Larry Rosen wrote recently in an article, those are the exceptions. For the most part, a lot of national radio is just there to fill space. Sometimes we're cynical about live and local. I wrote an article about live and local that was very well read and well received last September. I had a PD from a major market station call me up. He said, "Why didn't you include my station? How could you leave us out? We've been beating this drum forever." The next week, Rush Limbaugh became available in his market and Rush went on. Some stations are, at any given time, live or local. We have finally trained the listeners to the point where this matters, and we're starting to play games with them about it. And I still listen to a lot of stations that don't even try. I still listen to a lot of fairly big radio stations where I go 40 minutes and I don't hear another voice. I still hear a lot of stations where basically the only thing that's local is the commercials. So here's our awesome punch list again. These are great things when we do them. We don't always do them, but as I pointed out, the pure plays don't always do them. So why is TSL down by most accounts? Because radio is also the best delivery system for something that we've cultivated for a long time, continuous music. We can do all these things you see at the top of the screen, but we were also very good at continuous music, and we sort of doubled down on it. More music, less talk, fewer interruptions, fewer bad songs. There was a reason for that. When PPM came along, it showed that there were a lot of people who wanted exactly that from radio. We begrudge Pandora the right to call itself radio. Some of you in this room have heard me say this, but Pandora was basically the thing that we turned radio into. More music, less talk, fewer interruptions, no bad songs. And if you are an untended jukebox whose only local element is the commercials, now they are that too. So I believe in all of radio's strengths you see here. I am now going to say something a little contrarian to what we've said so far today and say, do not give up continuous music. We do it well, and that's what some people want from us. And that doesn't mean it shouldn't be hosted, well-produced, shared experience continuous music. But a lot of people, in having decided to double down on live and local, have decided that we have to get out of the continuous music business. I'm not ready to give that up yet. Radio still does the best job of playing the hits. We have 40 years of research. Every time a new group moves into each of our demos, we figure out what they want and we start over. When I hear the pure plays, every time a new pure play launches, I listen to the music and it sounds random to me. It sounds to me like a bunch of 22-year-olds are in a room feeding in a bunch of CDs they've never heard of and just feeding the beast. And I think a lot of the pure plays figure this out because they start by hiring from the tech sector, and eventually at some point they start hiring from broadcast radio. What do they have that we don't have as an advantage right now? Obviously, it's spot load. John says it's personalization. I think that counts a lot. I think if we were willing to address the spot load issue, we could narrow the playing field a little bit. We have 10 to 16 minutes. I listened to Pandora on Saturday. I heard 6 units over the course of the hour, one at a time, 15 seconds to 30 seconds, a total of 2 minutes and 10 seconds. That is so intimidating that most of us aren't even going to try. But I think we have to. Edison in The Infinite Dial found that 80% of broadcast radio listeners consider spots to be a fair trade, but nobody said 10 to 16 minutes. I understand the enormity of sending people out of this room to try and sell fewer spots for more money. People have been trying it for 30 years. Simon T. in Los Angeles tried it 25 years ago. Clear Channel tried it in Dallas about 7 years ago. If it was easy, none of you would have any objection to selling fewer spots for more money, right? Nobody is opposed to that on general principle. It just seems impractical. That said, I think what we can come out of this room with is the realization that we have to work toward a solution. 10 to 16 minutes is not going to be a sustainable model indefinitely. And if we do not make the decision on how to scale that back, it will be made for us. Right now, we have the chance to discuss that while we still control the discussion. Right now, we still have the chance to make a dramatic statement. Right now, we still have a chance to tell listeners while we have their attention. Right now, we still have a chance to reinvigorate their interest in radio. I am pro-unity, and I am not anti-commercial. I don't like saying commercial-free. I don't like disrespecting the advertiser. But if your competition won't cut their spot load, and you halved your spot load, and you went back on the air and said, half the commercials of any other radio station and fewer interruptions than Pandora, I think you'd have something. It's something we have to consider to continue to control the discussion, and if we can't do it here on our broadcast products, then we have to do it here. If we are absolutely sure that we cannot retrofit our radio stations for a sane spot load, then we need to create parallel products that have the spot load that people expect when they listen online. In fact, we should probably be creating alternate products anyway. There will be a whole panel tomorrow on the things people have been able to do that don't involve their stick. I will just say that I am surprised how few of them actually involve creating more radio, to Erica's point this morning. We tried for about 30 seconds. We spent just enough money on our HD2 radio stations to waste it. And then we basically moved on. Everybody wants, there are a lot of people who want more than what is practical in their market. We should be the people offering that to them. We have pretty much turned over that job to SiriusXM. We don't have to do that. We are experts in entertainment. We are experts in companionship. We are experts in community. We are experts in continuous music. Ideally, we are multi-talented. We all self-identify with this guy, right? He sings, he acts, he dances, he raps. He seems like somebody you'd like to meet. In other words, he pretty much is the punch list for what we used to think our jocks were. Since we are multi-talented, we have to engage on every front. That doesn't just mean the car. That means the bedside table. That means the desktop. We can get our PUR back in any of those places, and we have to. None of them are promised to us anymore. We should fight for the car. We shouldn't just fight for the car. Every type of radio for every consumer. There are 4 stations in every market that sound pretty much the same. we have 4 formats that basically sound like top 40 now. When there are fewer discrete choices, there are fewer reasons to turn on the radio. Buzz Bennett used to have a line, once somebody has heard their favorite song on the radio, their job is done and they can turn the radio off. Assuming they even have to turn the radio on to hear their favorite song now, that moment comes a lot sooner. There are very few markets now that are so over-radioed that we don't have some sort of format holes. To the point of radio versus audio, we can say the word radio is limiting, but we have not yet created all the radio we can create. Finally, every type of audio. We've spent a lot of time arguing about whether Pandora is replacing radio listening, whether it's replacing people's music collections. We now have statistics. It's replacing both, but more to the point, why didn't we, as radio, try to come up with a way of replacing listeners' music collections? We know a little something about curating music for people. In fact, maybe it's time for us to ask, whose business can we disrupt? Broadcasters, as I've said, are very good at disrupting each other's business. When Clear Channel went up against Pandora, when they launched personal stations on iHeart, they pretty much did what they had done on the local market level. They went commercial-free on iHeart. I don't know if they're still commercial-free. They went commercial-free on iHeart's personalized stations for at least 2 years. They tried to starve Pandora out, basically. 2 years later, Pandora is still there. They may have a day of reckoning coming up, but so may Clear Channel. And for the time being, Pandora's stock price is going up. As has
iHeart is
been,
still commercial free.
yeah, and
There's no listeners.
yeah, and it's and those personalized stations are the number 3 thing people want from them.
Too many cases, probably, with iHeart.
Yeah, so we basically need to get out of the business of being the Me Too iHeart. We need to find out what we're doing that doesn't currently exist. It is 47% of the audience is using online radio monthly. Can we take the 53% across on our own terms? It's a big job for an individual broadcaster. It is a daunting task, like 3rd or 4th in my list of daunting tasks so far. It is something that is going to have to come about at the organizational level, at RAB, at NAB, in groups like this, at the group level, at the multi-group level. The United Front is the only thing that is going to secure us a place in the dashboard. Right now, we all know that there's no one portal that includes all broadcasters. James Cridland, the radio futurologist from Britain, has a line that it's like asking manufacturers to install 3 different car radios. And at this moment, we have to ask ourselves if there's anything on our major broadcast portals that is so compelling that consumers would complain if manufacturers didn't offer it. And now, I'm going to do something that I haven't done when I've given this presentation elsewhere. I am going to speak very candidly and speak confidentially to the people in this room. This is a graph you've seen already. Valerie and I work together at R&R. Valerie can talk to anybody about anything. And at some point, I don't know how we got onto this conversation, Valerie was talking about the qualities of a perfect husband, a perfect spouse, a perfect partner. She said, somebody who makes you laugh and somebody who will keep you safe. Radio does that. Radio needs to renew the vows. To this list, after 15 years of being married, I will say, be reliable, but don't be routine. Don't take the other person for granted. Grow with the other person. Valerie heard this list and she added one more to it, which was be nice. We are not famous for nice at the moment. We are famous for prank phone calls. Be nice. Renew the vows. I have given you a lot of lofty goals. I feel like I do have to send you out of here with some actual concrete goals and things to talk about over the next day and a half. meaningful action on spot load, or at least the determination that we have to take some. We almost came out of Orlando with that, and then it got scattered to the winds.
What do you think is a reasonable spot load? I mean, I remember back in.
On a music station.
On a music station.
WKLU under Russ Oasis, did pretty well doing about 6 minutes an hour. If you are 5 minutes an hour and Pandora is 2, but they're stopping 6 times an hour and you're stopping twice. If you are 5 or 6 minutes, I think someone can work with that. Because at some point Pandora will get up to 5 or 6 minutes, but they won't get up to 10 or 16.
By the way, I don't think we should take talk radio out of this, because
Yeah.
I enjoy talk radio, and I find it incredibly annoying having to sit through all the crap to hear my favorite personality.
Well, and by the way, we have used talk radio as the excuse to do 10 to 16 minutes on music stations, because somewhere there is a sports station that is so great and has such hot franchises at the moment that they somehow get away with it. But it's not going to work on sports indefinitely either. The Stitchers of the world are going to find out, going to find some way to take
And we're lucky that Sirius XM runs the same amount of spots in talk radio, because they have to fill all the holes when they get the shows from the syndicator. Because if they didn't have to fill those holes, they'd be commercial free like their music channels.
But, listen, we could take a show of hands around the room, but I think I already know the answer. There is nobody in this room that purposefully is running 6 minutes an hour of commercials. Am I right?
Only in
Well, you said purposely.
Right. Right. It's an
Overnight.
outrageous.
We do it occasionally.
Weekend.
Right.
In order for us to get down to those kinds of levels, I would say on average, most of us are probably running 10, 12, so maybe 14 minutes even on music stations. I mean, whether it's right or wrong, that's just reality, because as we went through the recession, in order to keep billing up, we couldn't get the rate, we were just loading up on inventory. How do we get back down to reasonable levels? And I'll say probably 8 minutes, at least in my mind, is closer to the mark, where we'd almost have to double the rates, the cost per points to get there.
Yeah, I don't want to sound naive. I understand the enormity of what I'm suggesting. It was such a daunting suggestion that it basically hasn't been discussed in the past.
So this
And
is the
obviously,
first of your challenges, they get worse from here on down?
it's the big one, but again, the decision is going to be made for us, because at some point, no matter how little we sell them for, we are not going to be able to sell 60 minutes an hour.
Gary Rosnick, on all of his Class A FMs, reduced his commercial load to 6 minutes. Now,
Is he still in business?
No.
Now, but here's where I would suggest that is a great place to then start thinking about what your digital strategy is and how you're gonna monetize it. And one of the growing areas for broadcasters is what is referred to through Miller Kaplan as off-air. So it's events. And the stations that are doing events, and even in small markets, for instance, I could put BMI, and it came out of a program we do with the RAB. They'll bring songwriters into your market, and they'll do it for free for the first couple of years until you can get on your own. You won't have to pay them, and there's a model that we can help coordinate with you where you can make some real significant money in a small market, because you're not getting major artists to come to your markets, but songwriters you can get to your markets, and they'll sing the songs that the public knows. So there's a lot of things you can do, even with the music community. You're never gonna get Lady Gaga to come to your market, but there are a lot of emerging artists that no one's playing that you can create events with that aren't gonna cost you much money.
Yeah, there are things that will offset spots, and again, we may need to have a parallel suite of digital stations that offer people the spot load that they expect listening online.
On a typical radio station, I'm a small market guy. I've had a couple of stations that were not that, but I love small markets more. What percentage of a radio station's spot load now is agency produced, and how much of it's produced by the radio station itself?
I can venture a guess, but I think,
All of it. But
You're talking about agency,
I'm talking about, if I just take, because you're talking about big markets, I suspect, because here would be my premise. See, I think that we try to reduce everything to numbers because numbers are easier to discuss. Qualitative discussions, artistic discussions are messier, more challenging, more difficult. But on all of the radio stations that I've owned, we always gave credits. We had an index for how entertaining the commercial was itself. Did it have whimsy? Did we get the versatile? Did it do things that entertained? And commercials are not necessarily something that will tune someone out unless it happens to be, 6 straight minutes of car dealers shouting and banging
and you know what? I hear those car spots on Pandora, and they're even more jarring now because they come absolutely out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I grew up at the altar of Dick Orkin, too. I love great spots when I come across them. I have heard good debt relief spots recently. I work with Canadian stations, and generally in Canada, there is less of the debt relief spot followed by the student loan relief spot followed by the payroll loan relief spot. We can definitely make every moment sizzle. I don't know if we can make 10 to 14 minutes an hour sizzle to the point where people don't mind. I would love everyone to accept that challenge. I think in this room, more people do accept that challenge already. I think there are a lot of people here who care about the quantity and quality of their spots compared to some of what I hear.
Has there been any studies that show the reduction in effectiveness in the middle spot or the 7-spot set is, or the last one?
I believe there has been, but I mean, certainly, advertisers don't think they want to be in that 4th position, in that 6th position.
So I guess really the Coleman study is probably the only one that showed it was not as much of a tune-out as we expected it to be.
Some of which is because people are always coming in.
And the question is, how effective is it?
Well,
When does it become noise?
and also remember, even that Coleman study is among people who are still listening. If someone makes the choice that they are going to listen to something else at work because they think they are going to hear continuous music, the people who still choose broadcast radio have bought in. 80% of them think that our spot loads are fair for now. But again, we didn't ask them, okay, we're talking 10 to 14 minutes. Do you still think it's fair, right? So, thank you for letting me talk about radio in an audio world. I will say in conclusion, I don't know that we have to be called radio indefinitely. We are not called wireless anymore. I think we have to operate as a radio community for the foreseeable future. And I think we have to do the things that make great radio indefinitely, whatever we call it. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.